Very good evening, dear students. Welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy, the Hindu news analysis. So today is 30th April 2025 and today we have some very important articles for the discussion. So without any further delay, let's get into the discussion and let's discuss all important articles in a very detailed and in-depth manner. And the first article that we are going to start this session is about the waste management in India. And in fact, this article is very important for your general studies paper 3, and this article has been given in the Hindu newspaper. And what is the context of this article? So if you look at the scenario of the solid waste management in India, or overall solid waste management scenario in India, it is being said that now India has emerged as the world's largest largest plastic polluter, right? So in fact, India has been emitting or generating a largest amounts of plastics into the environment. And in fact, India per annum emitting 9.3 million tons of plastic. So this is particularly alarming because as a country with a huge population, and in fact India is already ranked number 1 in terms of population. So India has been emitting 9.3 million tons of plastic every year. And in fact, recently Supreme Court has come up with a verdict. The verdict is related to Vellore Tanneries verdict, right? So this Vellore Tanneries verdict has also offered a judicial template for this waste management in India. In fact, the Supreme Court has issued mandamus in this verdict. So in fact, when we talk about the writs within the fundamental rights under Article 32 of the Indian Constitution, mandamus is one of the very important writ. So mandamus is actually directs a public official to perform his duties. And Supreme Court has even issued a mandamus to enforce waste remediation and also environmental justice on a large scale. Here you have to remember what exactly is mandamus, and also the Vellore Tanneries case is related to the waste management in India. And India is also now emerged as the largest plastic waste emitter or generator in the world. So this is the context. And what is the waste management? So it is important for us to understand waste management. So when we talk about the waste management, it actually consisting of different components. Components such as a collection of waste, segregation of waste, because household generates waste, not just household but different sectors generates waste. So in this context, waste collection is very important, and once you collect the waste, you need to segregate the waste into different components, and then you need to treat the waste and then safely dispose the waste. So these are the essential components which actually forms part of the waste management, whether it is solid waste, liquid waste or plastic waste. So these different forms of waste goes through the different processes, because when we manage waste in a sustainable level, that could reduce its environmental footprint, and it could also reduce its potential to degrade the environment as well. However, it is being claimed that in India 95% of national waste collection is being done. Around 95% of the waste which is generated in India is collected. So this is what the statistics have been revealing that. However, one survey or one report which has been released by Nature in the year 2025, it has revealed that India's per capita plastic waste generation at 0.54 kilograms every day. So every day, every individual in India has been generating 0.54 kilograms of plastic waste. So this is actually a huge amount of plastic waste that every individual have been generating in India compared to the other countries, and that's why India now emerged as the largest generator of plastic waste. However, the official estimates of plastic waste generation in India stands at 0.12, and therefore the earlier discussed value of plastic waste generation in India per capita 0.54 is a very high compared to the official estimates of just 0.12% of plastic which is being generated by every individual in India. So therefore it has been highlighting an underreported rural waste and even exclusion of the informal sector as well, because in India we have the unaccounted nature of informal sector, and informal sector is not generally taken into consideration when you are compiling data. When we are actually taking into account the overall waste management, the informal sector is generally neglected. So along with the informal sector, the rural sector is also largely neglected. So therefore, this data has been indicating that a large amounts of plastic waste and also other different forms of waste generally underreported or unaccounted. And however, the government has undertaken a number of initiatives specifically aimed at waste management, whether it is a plastic waste, whether it is a solid waste, or different forms of waste, including e-waste also. A number of initiatives that the government has undertaken so that the waste can be managed in a much more sustainable manner. Now, what are the initiatives that the government has already launched? The first initiative that the government has launched was the plastic waste management rules. And in fact, India is the largest generator of plastic waste according to a report. So therefore, plastic waste has to be managed properly. It has to be managed sustainably, and we should also reduce the single-use plastic as well, because plastics are ultimately resulting in microplastics, and they are also entering into the food chain, because plastics are not biodegradable and they are creating a large-scale environmental footprint as well, threatening the health of human beings as well as the animals as well. Now, in this context, in this backdrop, the government of India framed Plastic Waste Management Rules 2016-2024. And in fact, the Plastic Waste Management Rules have introduced a clause called segregation at the source. For example, if you are generating plastic waste, you need to segregate the plastic waste. And apart from that, it has also introduced the extended producer responsibility. So under the extended producer responsibility, there are different agencies. For example, the producers, manufacturers, importers, and even the brand owners as well. So they have certain responsibilities with respect to the collection of the plastic waste and also safely recycling the plastic waste, so that the environmental footprint of the plastic waste can be substantially minimized. So therefore, it has also introduced the extended producer responsibility, and even it has imposed bans on the single-use plastic. And in fact, the government of India has come up with the ban on single-use plastic by the year 2022, because single waste plastic is actually having a large scale environmental footprint, and it is also threatening the health of human beings and the environment as well. And apart from that, another important initiative that the government of India has launched is Mandatory Jute Packaging Act 2010. And in fact, when we talk about a large scale bag such as rice or sugar, which is being distributed to every state through the public distribution system, so for the packaging of rice, wheat and sugar, jute bags are being mandated, so that the environmental footprint of plastic can be substantially minimized. And it also encourages the use of jute as well, because jute is environmentally sustainable and it can also be easily biodegradable as well. So therefore, the Mandatory Jute Packaging Act 2010, it has enforced eco-friendly jute packaging. So eco-friendly jute packaging, so this is important because it is biodegradable and it is not like a plastic. So therefore, it is important for us to promote the jute bags as an alternative, right? So for that reason, the Mandatory Jute Packaging Act 2010 was brought by the government. And in fact, other important initiatives, policies for the waste management, one is extended producer responsibility. I've already told you what exactly is extended producer responsibility. So as part of the extended producer responsibility, there are different agencies or different stakeholders who are involved. So whether they could be the producers, they could be the manufacturers, they could be the brand owners as well. So all these different stakeholders, they would have a certain roles and responsibilities, and it applies to producers, importers, brand owners, and it has actually mandated the mandatory collection, recycling of the plastic waste, and again promoting the reuse of the plastic waste as well. So therefore, it overall promotes a recycling of plastic waste. And in case any of these stakeholders don't follow the norms that are set out by the government as part of the extended producer responsibility, so they would pay the penalty, they would pay the compensation for non-compliance to those rules. And in fact, the government has also brought a policy for the decentralized waste management and waste governance at the local level or the grassroots level as well. So the responsibility for the waste management extended to the gram panchayats. Thereby it has been emphasizing on the local level accountability and even the rural waste management as well. So therefore an attempt has been made to brought the unaccounted or informal sector into the formal waste management sector. So however, India has been facing certain issues when it comes to the waste management, waste collection, waste management and waste recycling and even safe disposal of waste as well. So what are the issues that India has been discussing, and these are the key concerns for us when it comes to the waste management. So first of all, we don't have the proper data. So as I very frequently emphasize on the data-driven policy making, evidence-based policy making, and data-driven policy making is also very, very important, because you get a chance to regularly evaluate the effectiveness of the schemes, policies and initiatives that are actually brought by the government. So therefore, the official waste statistics or official waste management data exclude rural areas, exclude informal sectors, and it also excludes the open burning of the waste as well. In fact, these sectors are mostly contributed to the waste generation in India, but we are excluding these important sectors. So therefore the official waste management data lack the important sectors, they were not taken into the consideration. So apart from that, the other problem is there is no uniform waste audit methodology. So there is a need for a uniform waste audit methodology that has to be put in place, right? And in fact, a third party validation should also exist, because it provides us an opportunity to understand the loopholes that are existing in the waste management. So what are the areas where we could actually work on? So without data, without evidence, we may not be able to perform well when it comes to the waste management, and that is the first challenge. And the second most important challenge is the rural urban divide is existing when it comes to the waste collection and waste management. Because when we talk about the rural areas, the Panchayati Raj institutions actually play a very, very important role in waste management, overall waste management. But the Panchayati Raj institutions and rural areas and several other different stakeholders remained outside the formal waste collection systems. So thereby it has been further creating more and more problems or worsening the existing problems as well. And even the extended producer responsibility is also not properly implemented. So weak enforcement of the extended producer responsibility is a major problem. Under the extended producer responsibility, the producers, importers, manufacturers and the brand owners, who are collectively called as PIBOs, so they have obligations, they have certain obligations on themselves with respect to the waste management. But the problem is actually on the ground there's a lack of infrastructure. So there's a lack of infrastructure, particularly for the collection of waste, management of the waste, segregation of the waste and even the recycling of the waste as well. So on ground realities are completely different. And similarly, the weak enforcement mechanisms existing in India. So even though there are number of rules and there are number of legislative proposals for the waste management in India, on ground the implementation is very, very poor. So this is also another major problem that has been plaguing the waste management in India. So in this context, what should be the way forward? What are the appropriate measures that we could actually undertake? Now in this context, in the beginning of this particular session, we have discussed about the Supreme Court has issued a mandamus writ in Vellore Tanneries case of 2024. So mandamus actually make sure that a public official perform his or her duties. So therefore we need to bring in judiciary. So it is very important that we need to bring in the judiciary's intervention in case any public authority, any public official, they are not performing their duty with respect to the waste management in India, then it is very important that the judiciary must introduce a mandamus, right? So therefore there should be a time-bound waste management protocols that should be put in place, and Supreme Court can also play a very important role here. And apart from that, it is very important that we should have a proper data. So if we lack data and evidence, it is very difficult for us to manage waste in a much more sustainable manner. So for that, what we should actually do, waste audits that should be put in place. So waste audits should be mandatory, and there should be third party verification also, so whether the waste is properly managed or not. And we should also bring in the best practices that are followed all across the world, right? So when we practice the best practices that are followed across the world, so maybe that could improve, that could further help us better manage the existing waste, right? So whether it is solid waste, liquid waste, or e-waste, or any different type of waste. And similarly, mandatory infrastructure mapping is also very important. So because we have discussed that on the ground we are lacking the infrastructure, even though extended producer responsibility norms are put in place by the government, but on the ground we are lacking the infrastructure. So mandatory infrastructure mapping is also very important. For that, all urban and rural local bodies must be linked to the material recovery facilities, right? So for that, we should have a proper infrastructure as well. So when we have an infrastructure, when we collect the waste, we could be able to segregate the waste, and we could be able to recycle the waste as well in a much more efficient and effective manner. And this is a very important step that has to be undertaken. And similarly, the extended producer responsibility kiosks at the local level have to be set up. And the extended producer responsibility kiosks must be manned by the personnel from the producers, importers, brand owners. So therefore, the EPR kiosks must be accessible, and they could also be scalable when it comes to the plastic waste recovery, and it will also further help in better management of the plastic waste. And also, we could be free from the menace of the single-use plastic as well. However, the government pay principle, so this principle should also be brought in. And in fact, the Supreme Court has said that a state must compensate the victims. So there are victims who have been facing the brunt of poor solid waste management, and the Supreme Court has rightly said that the government must compensate the victims, and government can also recover the costs from the PIBOS. So if they are not properly following the rules, extended producer responsibility rules, the government can actually impose penalties and collect the compensation, and the compensation has to be provided to the victims as well. And this is what the Supreme Court has said, and this is also called as the government pay principle. And we need to leverage technology for the better waste management. So when we talk about the leveraging technology, so artificial intelligence is an emerging technology, the geographical information system based tracking, and geotagged waste maps. So all these different technological apparatus have to be brought in, because technology has a huge role to play. And in fact, it also plays a very, very important role in sustainably managing India's waste as well, right? So when we are able to manage waste, solid waste, liquid waste, plastic waste, e-waste, and it will help us achieve the objectives of the Swachh Bharat mission or Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. So I hope you have understood this. And the next very important topic, so this is about the afforestation or expanding tree cover in India. So understand one thing, that this is a very, very important topic. So this could be asked in your general studies paper 3 of mains examination, and this article has been given in the Hindu editorial section. So we'll understand what exactly is afforestation and how it is going to benefit India and Indian industries. So particularly when we talk about the plantation or tree cover, now we all knew that a climate change is a global phenomenon, and climate change is also having its links with extreme weather phenomena all across the world as well. Now in this backdrop, in this context, tree plantation or afforestation will aid us in carbon sequestration. So tree plantation and the carbon sequestration are a very, very important approaches that we need to adopt at this juncture. However, for India, when we talk about India, a rapidly growing economy. So we all knew that India is a rapidly growing economy, and India has been growing at near about 7% annual growth rate. So most of the industries in India are known as the carbon intensive industries. So why they are known as carbon intensive industries? Because most of the heavy industries in India still dependent on fossil fuels for their production process. Either they dependent on coal or any other fossil fuel to power the industries, to power the production process. So because of that reason, they are being considered as a carbon intensive industries. So despite they are being the carbon intensive industries, so India already have certain goals, certain ambitious goals. For example, India wanted to become a net zero by the year 2070. But if Indian industries continues to be carbon intensive industries, it will be very difficult for us to become a carbon neutral country by the year 2070, or net zero economy by the year 2070. And in fact, certain countries, the entire European Union, it has brought the carbon border adjustment mechanism. So carbon border adjustment mechanism would be much more costly, or it imposes penalties on countries or industries which are the carbon intensive industries. So in this backdrop, what we need to do? So one solution before us is afforestation, or expanding tree cover. Because if we expand the tree cover, so that will help us mitigate the climate change, right? So climate change is a global phenomenon, and it is also concerning worldwide, right? So therefore, one thing that we could do immediately is expanding the tree cover. So expanding tree cover, and apart from that, supporting the industrial growth as well as the rural livelihoods as well. Now, once we expand the tree cover, it will help us sequestration of more and more carbon that has been released by the carbon intensive industries. And expanding tree cover is also considered as a source of livelihood for the rural masses as well, right? Because it could provide a number of resources. And in fact, if we talk about India's overall tree cover, so it is very important for us to understand the data of a tree cover in India. So India's overall tree cover is 25.17%. So this is India's overall tree cover. So however, in the year 1988, so we have a national forest policy. This national forest policy has mandated that we should have a tree cover of a minimum 33% of the total geographical area. But contrary to that, as of now, we have a tree cover of just 25.17%. However, this shortfall that we have been observing, that the mandated level of tree cover that is required than the actual level of tree cover in India. So this shortfall is actually having a serious implications, particularly deforestation, urbanization, and even the industrialization, which has been primarily driving on the carbon intensive nature of the industries. So all these different factors continues to degrade the existing ecosystems. Now in this context, what India can actually do? So one thing that we can actually do, accelerate afforestation. So it is very important for us to accelerate or promote afforestation. Because, so as we have already discussed, that forests or trees are considered as natural carbon sinks, and they help in carbon sequestration. They also help absorbing and even storing the carbon dioxide, right? So therefore, sequestration potential can be substantially increased through the afforestation, right? So if we expand the tree cover, the sequestration potential of India can be substantially increased. So this is what the author has been explaining us. So since majority of our economic growth is coming from the carbon intensive industries, it is very important that we need to sequester, or we need to reduce the existing carbon in the atmosphere, and trees can actually become a sustainable alternative to do that. And apart from reducing the greenhouse gases, so increased tree cover will also improve soil health, right? So it is also having number of other benefits or other advantages as well. So one such advantage is that it improves soil cover, right? So soil health. Now in recent times, what has been happening when farmers have been excessively using the fertilizer and pesticides in their respective fields, and the monocropping practices, all these different practices have been led to the degradation of the soil health or soil fertility. So therefore, when we focus on afforestation or expanding tree cover, it also improves soil health, and it also help in recharging groundwater, because otherwise, so if a deforestation continues and if India don't work on the afforestation, then it will further create a problem for India. Because so one thing that we should understand is Indian agriculture is primarily driven by the groundwater extraction or groundwater, because we don't have the modern irrigation practices such as drip irrigation, sprinkler irrigation, which promote the efficient usage of the existing water resources. And because of that particular reason, groundwater recharge is very, very important, and expanding tree cover or forest cover can help us achieve this particular objective. And in fact, expanding tree cover will also help us retain water resources, and it also reduces the soil erosion. So soil erosion is also another major problem that the Indian agriculture has been facing. So when the fertile topsoil erodes because of number of natural factors and even anthropogenic factors, when the fertile topsoil erodes, so infertile soil would result in a lesser productivity. Right, so less productivity, less agriculture productivity means the food security in question, the remunerative prices for the farmers is in question, and it could also increase the overall farmer suicides in India as well. So therefore, keeping this in mind, in order to achieve resilience in agriculture sector, so afforestation and expanding tree cover are a very, very important areas that we have to focus on. Now, in this context, India has already introduced several policies to accelerate afforestation, right? So what are the policies that India has already introduced to accelerate afforestation? So firstly, India has introduced a national agroforestry policy of 2014, right? So in the year 2014, India has already introduced national agroforestry policy. And apart from that, India has already introduced a trees outside forests in India program. So these are two important programs. These programs aimed at expanding forest cover in India, right? So these programs essentially encourage the private landowners, farmers, industries, and their participation in the large scale tree plantation. Right, so this is the objective that India has introduced the national agroforestry policy, because we should not just focus on traditional forests, rather we should also focus on different stakeholders who could actually play a very important role in expanding the overall tree cover. And that's how we could actually sequester a large amounts of carbon which is being produced by the carbon intensive industries in India. And similarly, a Green India mission that the government has launched. So this Green India mission is also another very important and ambitious mission, and this mission is part of a national action plan on climate change. And this mission also aimed at expanding the overall tree cover and the revival of the degraded forests in a sustainable manner, and also promoting sustainable forest management involving the local communities. So these are the two important programs or initiatives that the government has launched. Now, apart from that, there are other areas also which have been, necessitating or which have been highlighting the need for afforestation or expanding forest cover. One reason we have already discussed, that the need for the carbon sequestration, because the Indian industries are carbon intensive industries, and the carbon intensive industries release a large amounts of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, and it is very important for us to sequester the carbon resources. Now, Indian industries are actually facing excess amounts of pressure. So the pressure is that you must reduce the intensity of the carbon. You must reduce the carbon emissions from your industry. So this is the pressure. So they're not just facing the domestic pressure, but also the international pressure. So one example is carbon border adjustment mechanism. So it clearly says that if your industry, if your products are produced through the carbon intensive methods, then you must pay the penalty while you bring your products into the European Union markets. So this is what it clearly says. So therefore, Indian industries have been facing a pressure to reduce the carbon footprint. So in order to reduce the carbon footprint, what they have to do? So they have to do a number of things. For example, so they can invest in renewable energy. They can invest in energy efficiency of their industries, and they can actually substantially reduce the dependence on the fossil fuels to power their industries. So if they can actually do all these different things, so they can reduce the carbon intensive nature of their industries. But however, it is not possible in a very immediate or a very short term. It is actually a long term measure. It also takes a lot of time for the Indian industries. Now, in this context, as I have already told you about the carbon border adjustment mechanism. So this carbon border adjustment mechanism mandates that, so this is a policy of European Union, and this actually mandates that any other country's products which are entering into the European Union markets, they must comply with the European Union environmental standards. Otherwise, these companies' products must pay a certain sum of penalty, and only then they will be allowed into the European Union markets. And it is also expected that this carbon border adjustment mechanism will come into effect in 2026. However, Indian companies are at the disadvantaged position if this carbon border adjustment mechanism is implemented, because Indian industries are the carbon intensive industries, and particularly there are some industries which are going to be at the disadvantaged position, such as a steel industry, cement industry, and the aluminum industries. So these are the main industries which may be at the disadvantaged position if this particular measure is implemented. And in fact, so if we talk about the overall trade between India and European Union, the overall trade between India and European Union is about 124 billion in 2023. And in fact, trade is also in favor of India. However, in case of such tariffs through the carbon border adjustment mechanism, so India would be at the disadvantaged position. Right? So in the backdrop of rising trade and enormous potential of trade between India and European Union, carbon border adjustment mechanism certainly a barrier to further improve or further enhance trade. However, Indian industries as a whole wanted to remain more and more competitive in the global economy. So if they wanted to remain more competitive in the global economy, it is very important that their products are widely acceptable. The products are affordable for the people all around the world, right? So therefore they have to invest substantially in the renewable energies. They have to invest in the energy efficiency of their production processes, and they need to invest in the carbon offset projects as well. So one such carbon offset project could be the large scale afforestation, large scale plantation of trees. So this is one way through which they could actually earn the carbon credits, and carbon credits would help them offset losses through the production process which is carbon intensive. And in this context, so when companies are coming forward and they are also making investments in this area, so this will help the companies align with the global sustainability standards, and they will also earn the carbon credits. Now, carbon credits will help these companies offset the carbon intensive nature of the production process. And this carbon credit mechanism has been mandated by the Clean Development Mechanism. So therefore, through the large scale tree plantation, most of the carbon intensive industries in India will gradually investing in renewables, will gradually investing in the much more energy efficiency technologies, so they can also earn the carbon credits by the large scale tree plantation over a period of time. And similarly, the sustainability, for example, in a country like India, so when we are emphasizing on sustainability and we are coming up with certain regulations on the companies to reduce their emissions into the atmosphere, so it should not be viewed as a regulatory compliance. Rather, it should be viewed as a strategic advantage. So how it would be a strategic advantage? So companies, in order to escape this regulatory compliance, so what they will do, so they will start investing in the renewable energies. So the power that has been generated from the renewable, so they could use it so that the production process would become less carbon intensive or clean. They could invest in energy efficient technologies, and they could even invest in the large scale tree plantations all across different parts of India as well. So therefore, this has to be viewed as a strategic advantage rather than merely a regulatory compliance. And in fact, companies are integrating the sustainability principles, right? So when they are integrating sustainability principles into their production process, so they are no longer a carbon intensive industries, and the trust and goodwill of the companies in the public eyes could also be further increased. And in fact, the companies are also focusing on developing the green supply chains. So what are these green supply chains? So the entire supply chain is green supply chain, and these supply chains are not like they are contributing to the large scale environmental degradation or resource degradation or emission of greenhouse gases. Rather, they are started procuring raw materials in a much more sustainable manner, such as procuring raw materials from the sustainable forestry projects, and they are also implementing energy efficient manufacturing processes. So all these things have to be done that so that India could actually continue to maintain the economic growth trajectory, because we have ambitious goals that by 2047 India is poised to become a developed country, a Viksit Bharat by 2047. And apart from that, we also wanted to become a net zero by 2070. So in order to achieve all these ambitious goals, different stakeholders should come forward, whether the communities, the government, the private sector, corporates, everybody should come together, and they should focus on reducing or limiting the carbon intensive nature of the economy in a sustainable manner over a period of time to achieve all these ambitious goals. So the next very very important topic is Special 301 report. So we'll understand what exactly is a Special 301 report and why this report is in news. So the context of the Special 301 report is that India has been again re-added into the US priority watch list. So US priority watch list is a list where if countries are having the policies, for example in India's case, India is not properly implementing the intellectual rights policy, and that is why India is placed under the priority watch list. Now, intellectual property rights are very very important for any country. For example, imagine that a pharmaceutical drug that has been invented by a US based pharmaceutical manufacturing company, and if this company comes to India and it has established its manufacturing base and it started producing this drug, due to poor IPR protection, other companies have started copying the drug. And in fact, this particular company has invested a lot on research and development of the particular drug. So therefore the benefits of selling the drug in the Indian market and the global market should belong to this particular company alone. But because of poor IPR protection in India, what has been happening is that this drug is copied by the other companies and they are started selling this as another variant of the drug. So because of this reason, companies are at the disadvantaged position. So on this pretext that US again added India in the priority watch list because India not properly implementing the intellectual property rights policy, right? And in fact, this priority watch list is part of a Special 301 report. Right? So the priority watch list is part of the Special 301 report, and in this priority watch list, not just India but various other countries could become part of it, right? Now, so India actually remains one of the most challenging major economies, right? So India is a most challenging major economies with regard to protection and enforcement of the intellectual property. So this is what the US Trade Representative report says. So the report says that the patent issues continue to be particular concern in India, right? So this is the major concern in India. Secondly, stakeholders also have reported unauthorized file sharing of video games, reprints of academic books, and also among the other issues. So companies are also facing uncertainty due to insufficient legal means to protect trade secrets in India, and because of that reason, so India has been added to the Special 301 report, particularly the priority watch list of Special 301 report, right? So that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much.